When you report fake news, which CNN does a lot, you are the enemy of the people. Go ahead.
This is fake news.
You don't trust journalists. They're the enemy of the people, members of the mainstream media, and fake news reporters. And while everyone is certainly entitled to their opinion, a journalist's primary responsibilities is first to bear witness and report on events that the public otherwise wouldn't know about. And second is the most important of all. It's to hold truth to power. Fake news is nothing new. Propaganda has been used for centuries to advance political agendas. And the phenomenon of fake news is neither the fault of us, the viewer, nor the journalists. And it's not just limited to one end of the spectrum or another. As I discussed in part 1 of this video, fake news has affected us all. But the problem of fake news now, the reason why it's such a problem now, is not because of journalists. It's because of partisanship. It's because of polarization in our media, as well as in our society. So why does fake news spread? And has it ruined journalism forever? Find out about polarization and journalism in the era of fake news, and why we're not the enemy of the people. Hey guys, what is up? I'm Kara, the creator of Round Our World, and welcome back to my channel, your place for video tips, storytelling techniques, and video marketing advice. This is part 2 of my fake news video series where I'm discussing why fake news spreads, why it's not the fault of journalists, and what can be done about it. If you haven't done so already, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Let's get into this video.
And I know journalists, you guys are definitely trying to do good work. I just think that a lot of people don't trust you right now. And can you blame them?
There is currently a deadly virus ravaging through the streets of America, and like any smart virus, it's mutating to be as fatal as humanly possible. Now, I'm not talking about the virus that you're probably thinking of, because this virus goes by the name of misinformation, and it's already infiltrated the American news media. Even before the 2016 election, journalists were not friends with the public. A journalist's primary responsibility is to seek and report the truth, whether that agrees with your political ideology or not. But a journalist is not the enemy of the people either. A journalist, to its core, is a storyteller. They have to tell the story. But if done correctly, the story unfolds itself, because the more you chase leads, the more you source quotes, the more a story reveals itself. And that's a good journalist. Chasing leads and sourcing quotes. Not spreading misinformation. Not putting themselves in the story. A good journalist should be both humble and objective. And when I say objective, I mean to take oneself out of the story, to take personal feelings out of the story altogether. I do not mean to be neutral. Too often we confuse objectivity with neutrality. But objectivity means to take feelings out, to only report the facts. Neutrality means to stay on both sides of the issue. And the reason why this is impossible to be neutral as a journalist is because sometimes facts forces us to be on one side of the issue and not the other. Journalists operate like scientists at first, with a working hypothesis where they go and chase down leads and sources and quotes that will either prove or disprove their hypothesis. But it's important for a journalist to be humble. They have to be willing to give up on that story when there just isn't enough evidence to support that hypothesis. Because otherwise, if they don't give up on that, if they're not humble enough to say that this story is not there, that there is just not enough facts for this story to be true, they would be partisan. And that is not what a journalist should be.
But without some common baseline of facts, without a willingness to admit new information and concede that your opponent might be making a fair point and that science and reason matter, then we're going to keep talking past each other, and will make common ground and compromise impossible.
Obama is right. Partisanship erodes democracy. And right now, partisan bias operates more like racism in America than political debate. Just look at the vile rhetoric we call the people that don't agree with our political views. Look at what we say to the other side. That only fuels more partisanship and more polarization. The very term fake news is partisan in itself. On one side, the term applies to all news that does not subscribe to a certain political ideology. On the other, the term applies to news that is salacious and ridiculous, and the people that believe it are either too dumb to realize it or too dishonest to care. But fake news isn't solely the fault of personal failings. We're all susceptible to it. And you can learn more about that in part 1 of this video, Why We Fall for Fake News, which I'll link up here and in the description bar below. But the problem with fake news goes far beyond the spread. It's the deep bias for one political party over another that acts as a sort of prism for facts, refracting different realities, different truths for one party and another.
Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that.
Partisan refraction has fueled the spread of fake news in the last few years, particularly in the US. But the repercussions of this spread goes far beyond just a few shares on Facebook or Twitter. It's affecting more than the people's trust in government. It's affecting the public's trust in the media.
Don't believe the crap you see from these people, the fake news.
As I've mentioned before, a journalist's primary responsibility, and the most important one, is to hold truth to power. But how can we do this when politicians won't even talk to some journalists because they don't agree with the news on that site? Journalism is credited as being the fourth of state, and having a free press is vital to democracy. And without a free press putting a check on the government, we the people would have very little resources to check the claims politicians make. Imagine what would have happened with Watergate without Woodward and Bernstein's reporting. Imagine what would have happened with Harvey Weinstein in the Me Too movement without Ronan Farrow's reporting. If we didn't have a free press to get our news from, we'd have to get our news from the people that are making it themselves. Because journalism is a key to government transparency. Political debate is healthy to some extent. And for a long time in America, we all agreed that there was a problem and we agreed on the facts. We just disagreed on how to solve it and the best person to solve it. But somewhere in the 1980s, this all took a turn. American campaigns and American campaign ads took a very, very negative turn. The opposing party became the enemy, and the media took sides. Today, Americans view political ideology as akin to race, ethnicity, and gender. This is kind of troubling because a presidential candidate is more than just someone to lead the government. It's a team to cheer on. It's a leader of a tribe. This partisan divide makes us believe stories from our tribe over those not in our tribe. This is only fueled by the fact that under a partisan lens, humans are really quite bad at figuring out what to believe. So we use a shortcut. If a news source was credible once before, it gave us a credible piece of information. We will then assume from then on that it's a credible news source. And that's a problem because all fake news is rooted in a little bit of fact. But different media outlets spin that fact to appeal to that tribe. Our media outlets are becoming increasingly biased, and that is only made more apparent when we look at the types of headlines that are coming out of different news sources in the last couple of months. We're not reporting the same things. We're not talking about the same things. But now we have an even bigger problem. Because politicians are saying not to believe journalists, that journalists are lying to the public. And I take personal offense to this. When you delegitimize journalists and you delegitimize facts, you create a vacuum on one of the most important checks in civil, economic, and political discourse. Because who then is going to be there to hold power to account? Can we really rely on the public to hold power to account then? Covering topics that would be considered newsworthy to an American audience. And while I will be the first to admit that traditional journalism is flawed, because we can't be everywhere at once and stories go undercovered and underreported, creating a certain media blackout. But that is not lying to the public. Journalists have a certain set of ethics to uphold. And when one of us makes a mistake, swift action is taken to make sure that mistake is rectified and the American public is given the facts. But when we're told not to believe journalists, that the media is fake news, the only people to believe are the politicians. And how do we know that they're not lying to us?
Our job is to put the best obtainable version of the truth out there.
Mr. President, the media is not fake news.
So what can be done? We have to trust and support traditional journalism, which is devoted to research, fact-checking, and in-depth investigation of issues. The very journalism that is under attack. How do you fight the fake news that is already out there, that's already spreading? Fact check. If the president is saying one thing and other sources are saying another, check their methodology, check their sources. There are sites out there like the AP, Reuters, and factcheck.org that make it easy for you to check these claims. Remember, fake news purveyors are counting on you being objectively lazy and that you would share any type of salacious news, no matter the credibility and no matter the validity of it. And I'm not saying that you should believe everything the mainstream media tells you. Far from it. What I'm saying is that you should believe a credible source over an unidentified source. Journalism is serious business. You have to understand how to consume it, how to cross-reference it, and how to trust it. Everywhere that I have worked has had a methodology for corroborating facts and sources. And I have only ever worked for the mainstream media. Remember, what journalism sets out to do is first to bear witness and to say something is happening. And second, and by far the most important, is to hold truth to power. Let us not go down the road where we are no longer speaking truth to power, but we can't even recognize what is truth. Tell me in the comments below what you think the mainstream media's role is in the spread of fake news and what journalists can do about it. If you liked this video or this video series, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. I come out with videos just like this one every week.